sex and food. It's the emotional wave that makes people sexy. And if you take away the emotional wave, they're not sexy anymore. You know, the emotional wave has been the great seducer for tens of thousands of years. It's the great seducer. Fuck me, fuck me, fuck me. Here's the wave. Really, the solar plex is very crude at the emotional level. It's all about attracting. I remember our whole genetic program. Our whole genetic program is all about making more in order that the species can survive. It's the only thing the genes care about. It's the only thing they ever care about. They don't care about you. They don't care about whether you got a good sex life or not. All they care about is making more. And because of the genes and their priority, their imperative is to make more, that there are aspects of our nature that are designed to bring that about. We have two things in sexuality. We have availability and drive. We have availability that is in the sacral center. We have drive that is in the emotional system. If you take away the emotional wave, you take away the sexual drive. Anyone here who without any sexual drive would be interested in sex? I mean, really, think about that. You know, if you've never got horny again the rest of your life, you think you'd engage in sex. Well, yeah, well, why not? No. There's no drive. Not only is there no drive if you take away the emotional wave, but the 59th gate is the opposition to the 55. And as the opposition to the 55, that is, it is a mirror chemically. It is a mirror chemically. Just as if you look at the hexagrams at either end, you'll see they're a mirror image of each other. That there's going to be transformation through that 59th gate. I'll show you how that works later when you see the stages and how that operates. That 59th gate, the sacral center. The sacral center is about availability. Now the 59th gate is a gate that's about the genetic imperative to reproduce. Now it's going to be changed. And one of the driving forces of that change is the 34th gate that's also there in that lineup. Because that 34th gate, as we well know, says, I'm not available, I'm busy. So, I'm not horny, and I'm busy. Now, when you put those two things together, you eliminate sex. No joke. You really do. You put those two things together, and you eliminate sex. You just do. Now, I'm not saying that sex is going to disappear overnight. 200 years from now, we will still have retros that are making love. I like the old way, they'll say. It's fun. And there'll be people who say, those retros, how disgusting they are. How primitive they are. Look what they have to do to amuse themselves. But it's a vast change. And you can see that when you look carefully at this, what you're really looking at is that when you're looking at that 34, what you're looking at is the whole direction. The whole creative example. The example is, I'm busy. Hey, I'm busy. I'm busy. And aside from that, I don't have to make children with you. I can order one from the factory. Well, it's true. I'm reading a lovely little article yesterday. A group of scientists have just created 80 new species. 80. Yeast. Very simple. But after all, 80 new species. They were asked if they'd given them names yet. They said, there's too many and we haven't thought about it yet. You know, you can order your cross.
Well, I want one that comes in like this. All the horror that we have now about all of those things. Aren't you lucky you're going to die soon? You don't have to live all of that. Because it doesn't belong to us. Be very clear about that. It doesn't belong to us. We're not ready to abandon sexuality. We're not ready to abandon the sexiness of the emotional wave. Christ, Hollywood would be out of business. We're not ready for that. That's not us. We're not going to be born in that time. We're going to carry all this old stuff. We're the retros. We're going to carry all this old stuff forward. But the change is coming. I'm busy. I'm not available. I have no drive. I'm the mother's son. I have enormous concerns for the yin spirit on this planet. Nobody has been enslaved or abused longer than women. No greater liberation confronts the human female than the liberation that comes with this next cycle. It's real liberation. No longer are they bound to the rules that they've had to live by for tens of thousands of years. This change in the sexuality, this elimination of the emotional wave, slowly but surely, it liberates both male and female to the freedom of themselves. And this is one of the most dynamic themes of the selfishness of the 55th gate in the 6th line. This is about human beings finding their own true authority. Their own authority. Not authority that is dictated by the genes and their need to replenish. The moment that we're able to do that outside of the vehicle is the moment that liberation begins. It just does. And we will. I've already seen the miracle of what technology can do when it comes to, replacing the workings of the womb. My youngest son was extremely premature, months and months in an incubator, with hundreds and hundreds of drugs going through his body to give him all of the things that he couldn't get from not being in the womb. He's fine. We have incredible intelligence, our gifts of manipulation. We are going to get to the point of that liberation. And it's something that is essential. It's only when we stand as unique, diversified individuals in our own authority that we really have gotten to where we're intended to get to. And that you cannot do that if you're burdened by ancient chemistries that don't fit anymore and aren't necessary anymore. Now, by the way, it's not like we all have to come to some kind of intellectual decision about, let's stop doing this. It isn't going to work that way. It's going to happen. It's going to happen because it's the program. It's not going to happen to us. It's going to happen to the children that are born in that time. The children that are going to be defined by the programming energy of that era. They're the ones that are going to be different. They're going to be really different because these aren't going to be the same forces. And you can see how fast, in our age of racing along to make sure we have the answers, how fast we're getting to the point where we're going to be able to create babies any way we want. Anyway, this incredible experiment that took place in Washington State, not Washington State, around Washington, D.C., some university lab, where they took an extinct ox and they gave birth to it out of a cow. Now they're planning to give birth to a panda bear out of a cow. A panda bear out of a cow. See, these stem cells, they're incredible. You can have cows that give birth to 8 or 9 babies at a time. Human babies. It's my old joke, it would please Mother India no end. Have all these cows giving birth to human babies. Now, wouldn't that be mythology come full circle? But you see, we're developing the skills to be able to do all those things. And no matter what your moral qualms are, I mean, you know I'm not a moralist, I don't give a damn about all that stuff. You have to see that that's the wave. There's this wonderful little Chinese scientist in Hawaii, Maui, who's cloned pigs and ducks, and he's a cloner. And somebody asked him, he was having an interview with him, somebody said to him, what are you doing this for? What's the value of this? He said, today, none. Tomorrow, I think we're going to need it. Just like that. Little old guy. Because we are. It's going to be in demand. We are becoming extinct. Look, every single species gets a ticket, just like we get a ticket in a vehicle. Every species is just a model year. It's a model design. None of those model designs are eternal. All of those model designs have a beginning and a middle and an end. Our species is coming to an end. We are becoming physically extinct. Physically extinct. We're dying out. I mean, it's just a fact. And the reality is that our challenge is that when the forces say to us, you're becoming extinct, we go like this. Nah, 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 nah. We're smarter than you. We can become naturally extinct. So what? We can still make more. Because we know how. We know the secret of life. We know the secret of life. I don't think anybody still grasps where we're at in terms of our ability to be able to bring new forms into the world. It is an astonishing achievement. It really is incredible. This is our magic. It's the only magic of humanity, are these incredible minds. Our ability to organize things, manipulate things, investigate things. The fact that we can actually reproduce ourselves unnaturally is an extraordinary achievement. Show me one species on this planet that ever could defy extinction. Were dinosaurs sending missiles up there to knock away the asteroid? Would have saved this planet from killer monkeys. No, we will. We will do whatever it takes, because that is the vastness of our vanity. We will do whatever it takes to keep on being the top of the food chain. And yes, we're becoming extinct. And that whole extinction is about the fact that our whole sexual drive is breaking down. All of that is going to fall apart. The genetic imperative for that is going to fall apart. In the rave, it won't even be a fact. I mean, it won't even be interesting, considering what they're going to be able to do. Sex is, it's nothing. It's just rocks rubbing. So all of this brings a real transition. We're in a stage. Now, it's not like we're going to become extinct overnight, in the sense that our sterility is going to reach such a level that we are unable, to in any way be able to replenish the population. But I guarantee you, and they can check me out later, I guarantee you within a couple of 100 years, we're going to be down to about 20% fertility on the planet. That's practically nothing. The reality is that this is our time to die out, and we will simply not permit it to happen. We won't. It's one of the great jokes. Okay. So, we're going to have a change in our sexuality, and that change in our sexuality is going to be a dominant role. In other words, intimacy is going to become something different. One of the things to understand about the availability of the 59 is that the availability of the 59 is conditioned by the emotional 6. And ultimately, in the mutative transformation that starts in the 55, eventually the 6 is transformed. And it is the 6 that triggers the way the 59 works. And the moment you take away the emotional wave from that, the moment you take away the drive that's there and its relationship to the availability on the other side, what you have is a new kind of intimacy. And that is intimacy that does not carry a sexual connotation. What's interesting about that is that it begins with the 6-line theme. Now, if you look at the 59-6, it says a one-night stand, but that has to do with the 6 in its first 28 years as a third-line process, in which you're constantly thinking that you found the answer only to discover that you made a mistake. Most people who have the 59-6 in their adulthood have very little interest in one-night stands. They have very little interest in sex. They've been too disappointed in their process. That 59-6 is something that's going to be very, very different. It opens up this new theme of intimacy, but intimacy without it being a sexual imperative. Because it will not be a sexual imperative. The other thing, just to finish off this personality side of it, so-called, is the 20th gate. Obviously, what we're dealing with here is that we're dealing with another definition as a result of opposition. We saw that in our time, where we're dealing with the 4037. When we move into the next cycle, we're dealing with the 2034. Now, my jokes about the 2034 are endless. The 2034 is, I'm busy in the now. Now, I don't know what I'm busy for, and I don't know why I'm being busy, and I'm certainly not being busy for myself, but I am busy. And it's one of the things that, by design, humanity has been endowed with 3 basic functions. And you can see those 3 basic functions through the definitions that are the result of opposition. The 4037 we've already seen. That is the basic need for humanity to come together in reliable bonds and to come together in reliable bargains in order to establish the foundations of community so that in the end, blah, 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 we can nurture our young and bring them up and so forth and so on. We have the 4323. And the 4323, which is the individual aspect of mind, that ultimately that is the mind that is most focused on efficiency. Humanity is designed to be efficient, to use the mind to find ways to do things faster, quicker, and simpler, so that the 4323 can then spend its time musing about its knowing, or lack of it. And then finally the 2034, we're all designed to be busy. We're all designed to be busy, efficient, and bonding. That's us. Busy, 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 busy. You have to understand that this is going to be a very, very busy age. But the 2034 is integration. And not only is it integration, but as you'll see when we get to the other side, you have the third aspect of that integration. The only thing that's missing is the 10th gate. The behavior is not there. You have 3 aspects, the 20, 34, 57. And this is all about I'm busy, and I'm busy, and I'm busy, and I'm busy. And it's very, very selfish because I'm busy surviving. I'm busy looking after my survival. Juxtapose that to what we were just talking about. Genetically, through the emotional system and the way in which the sacral worked, we were always busy making more. We were always busy making more. That the present generation was only of value until it had produced the next generation, genetically speaking. This era that's coming, we're not going to be busy making more. We're going to be busy looking after ourselves. We're going to be busy with ourselves. And we're going to be busy surviving. We're going to be busy surviving, and we are going to be the archetype of busyness. It's going to be the new human configuration. Now, we've always been busy. We've always been busy. But we've always been busy making more. And remember that the more you make, the more you work, the more complex your life, the more infrastructure you need, the more control you have to have, the more organized environment you need, and blah, 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 and all the stuff that's part of our time, but that will not be part of the next cycle. The next cycle is not going to be filled with people who say, I believe in global organizations. It's going to be filled with people who say, I'm into myself. It's going to be very, very selfish. I'm talking about human beings. Remember, no responsibility built into the program. No responsibility to build anything. No responsibility to build new lives. No responsibility to go where no one has gone before, da-da-da-da, all that stuff. All that's over. I'm just busy with my life, thank you very much. Now if you're awake, that's magic. Great era to be awake. If you're the not self, that's a very lonely, frightening place. And the busyness? What do you think's going to happen on this planet of 6 billion when the population crashes? How are all these things going to be maintained? I mean, we're going to be very busy. We're going to be very busy. Very, very busy. Too busy to think about spirituality. Too busy to be concerned with love. Just busy with oneself. Now again, very difficult for us to imagine because that's anathema to the way in which this cycle works. This cycle says, we're all one, we're a family, we're the brotherhood, sisterhood of humankind, we are the earth, blah, 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 we're all of this and this and this and this, yes. But all of that is only because we're trying to find out what the whole is. That's all. It isn't because any one of us are naturally equipped to recognize it. We're not. Raves will have a better grasp of that. We're not. And you really have to see that the moment that the foundation is laid, that next cycle, all they're going to do is step from it, live off of it. And they're going to live off of it with a different program. Okay, let's have a break. Take a look at the other side here now and take a look at this configuration. One of the things to notice about this side is the 53 and the 51 to begin with. And it's one of the interesting things to see, first of all, that the relationship of the 51 is to the 25, which is the channel of initiation. So we're entering into an era of initiation. Obviously, we've got a mutative force that's going to be released. We are going to have a mutation in terms of a special mutation. We're going to have a new species emerge. The 51 represents the theme of initiation. The 53, as you well know, the 53 is the gate of beginnings. It's all about a new start. And it's all about the freedom that literally comes with a new start. And so we have as underlying forces that we have a deep theme of initiation and a new beginning. And again, it's something to really see. There have been many examples of cultures, high cultures, that have died. That is, the source of the high culture has died. And people continue to live off whatever that culture provided for years. The fall of the Roman Empire, the fall of Mayan Empire. There's so many examples of the collapse of higher cultures in which there was no more growth, there was no more development, but that didn't mean that it wasn't taken advantage of. Certain aspects of it, certain foundations of it were continued by following civilizations regardless. And basically one of the things you have to see is that what we're establishing in our time, and again when I say our time, it goes back hundreds of years, what we've established in this cycle is that we're establishing the foundation for the close. I opened up by saying I'm a closer of the round. Well, you would think a closer of the round would show up on the last day, but that's not the way that it works. The round is really closing here. It's closing here. It's closing in the sense that the foundation of what this has been all about, this is the time to establish it. In other words, our whole process, that whole process that began, 100,000 years ago with the development of our species, this whole process of getting to a point where we exhibit the kind of intelligence that allows us to become creative forces, in other words, allows us to play God, This whole movement of being able to discover all the secrets, to find out the nature of life, all of these things, this is our process. And our process is coming to an end here. This is the other side of Eden. After this, they go back out. This is the place, this is the gathering in the garden where the whole family gathers together and all the secrets are revealed. It's not about anymore that it's quote unquote Adam and Eve. You got the whole planet that's participating. At least the whole planet has the opportunity to participate in this place in the garden in which everything is revealed. Here's the story. Here's how it works. This is the whole movie. This is what it's all about. Here it is. But when you step over to the next line, again, it's not of interest to them, other than being able to take advantage of anything that's there. They're going to be too busy. They're going to be too busy to want to get involved in anything new. They're just going to be busy living. Living. The theme of the garden as mythology was that you get sent out. Anybody who comes in on the cross of Eden knows this. You get thrown out into the world. You get thrown out into the harshness of the world. You get thrown out. And the point to see is that this is not a matter anymore that you're throwing anybody out. You get to this point and everything is laid out, and then there's nothing to do. When there's nothing to do, everybody's going to be busy. Isn't that wonderful? There's nothing to do. Listen, when you're busy, you don't think very much. This is not going to be a thinking era. After all, one of the truths of our time is the recognition that mind is useless when it comes to decision making. If you have children, large swaths of the young population who are able to grasp and receive human design when they're young, their perspective on life and their perspective on the mind is going to be totally different. They're not going to be mindfucked. They're not going to be people who rely on the mind to guide them. Because it's been our role to develop our intellectual and our awareness intelligence for so long that it is our assumption that that's what it's all about. We've needed this kind of exploratory intelligence in order to be able to find the foundation for all the knowledge. And this has been part of our process. But my retirement, I will not think about human design. Why should I? I'm awake. What the fuck do I need to worry about human design? You're only going to be interested in human design if you're the not self, trying to figure out how to be the self, or you're somebody who by their karma, their geometry, whatever, ends up being helpful or a servant or a distributor or a bringer of this knowledge to others. But the reality is that if you really are living out your nature, all of this doesn't matter anymore. It doesn't. Just live out your nature. I'm more interested in people living out their design than people studying human design. Because I'm very aware of the fact that after 2027, the study of human design isn't the point. Living your design will be. Will be. And it's one of the most important things to grasp about the difference between our era and the way we explore this knowledge. There's never been anything like this knowledge. Ever, 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 ever. We have never had such a gift. Never had such a gift. And yet we're stuck with this cycle's way of exploring things. It's this deep, deep mental exploration. And on one side, there's the great positive that we get to express all of this and we get to solidify the foundation through our gift of intellectual exploration. But the other side of it is that it takes us away from the essence of what this is, which is just a simple tool to awaken. A simple tool that allows you to be yourself. And that is the most difficult tool to be able to work through with adults. And it's nothing to do it with children. Finally at this point in my career, beginning in April, once a year I'm going to do special trainings just for kids. And I can teach them in 2 days what's taken me 10 years to teach adults. In 2 days. That's what I'm looking forward to. Now, there's a classroom where I can be amused. And they're not heavy like you are. And they're not serious like you are. They want to have fun. They want to enjoy themselves. They want to have a good life, So easy to give them the truth. So easy. Don't have the same resistance. Don't have the same conditioning. Don't have the same blocks. It's so much easier. And the truth is something that's contagious. And when you learn the truth when you're young, what an advantage that is in life. Enormous advantage. Again, that's this window closing. This is our time, yes, foundation, but please understand, it's not about, people have always said to me, we got to have a human design university. Yeah. After 2027, try to find people who are going to enroll. It's just there. You see, look, either this works mechanically now, between now and 2027, we either prove, and it has been, at least scientifically, in the sense of what type is, and experientially through now tens of thousands of people who've experienced human design, that the reality is that by 2027, we get to a point that everybody understands that this is a mechanical truth, and that children should simply learn this when they're little. And then we won't need all that, except for the retros who will still be studying the books. Ross said, yeah. Just live your life as yourself. And it's a message that belongs to the next time. I know that. I try to deliver it now, but that I have no choice. I have to, but it's for that cycle. And it's not for them to study it. It's not a first line, it's sixth line. You can't imagine how vulnerable the sixth line is. You can't imagine how vulnerable that sixth line is to anything that is not correct. This is our direction. Those of you that participate in the second half of this program, where I go through the nature of changing the world, when we get to Buddhas, when we get to the nature of Buddhahood, to understand what that really is, that's the unique authority alive in each being. You can only be an example based on your own authority. You can never be an example based on somebody else's authority. Your authority. You are the example. We're entering into a 6-line phase. When you enter into a 6-line phase, you've got a pressure on humanity to be a role model. Everybody their own role model. There is still not anywhere on this planet a convention that protects individual human rights. Does not exist on this planet. Social human rights within the context of a society or a culture, these are things that we have expressed. But individual human rights? You scratch any politician on that question and they will turn away quickly. They want anybody to have individual human rights. But that's the point. And where we're going to is the demand for it. Now I want to tell you something else about a 6-line era. It's fraught with death. Nothing more vulnerable than the 6th line. In our era, with the 6th line being the theme of mutation, to recognize that anybody carrying a 6th line in their profile, that if they're not being correct, they're at physical risk. Physical risk. We have disease cocktails in the world that are getting really spooky. You turn on the news today and you'll see that there are now millions of people that are going to be given smallpox vaccinations, a disease that we declared dead in 1974, a disease that was a horror, absolute horror. But we've got a planet in which there are human beings that have no problem in opening up a jar somewhere. The AIDS epidemic, all of the chemicals in the atmosphere, the impact of ultraviolet rays through the open ozone layer into all of that chemical soup, all of the things that are at work. The human immune system is under enormous pressure. It's under enormous pressure. And it's one of the things to be very, very clear about is that when you go into a six-line era, what you're talking about is when I talk about the collapse of population, I'm not simply talking about people not having sex anymore. Yes, that's going to be part of the process, but it's not going to happen overnight. It's not like, and suddenly in 2027 it all comes to an end. It isn't. You have to see that the immune capacity is weakening. Remember, we're becoming extinct. And in order for the species to become extinct, it has to become weak in its immune system, its basic protection. We have a weakening of the immune system. We have a global weakening of the human immune protection system. You can see that because we spend fortunes on bolstering it, on helping the immune system survive everything from the common cold to all kinds of variations of disease. Our immune systems are getting weaker and weaker, not stronger. There's the illusion that people have that because we live longer, it's because our immune systems are healthier. It's nonsense. Our immune systems are weaker than they've ever been, other than those cultures that are still living a primitive lifestyle. And obviously they're not our future. Humanity's dying out. The immune system is weakening all the time. So when you step into a six-line phase, you're going to have the ability to disrupt the immune system. Now, one of the things that's going to be a major, at least, time will tell if that's true, is that one of the things that's clear to me that will happen is that we're going to have a famine on this planet, the likes of which we've never known. And we're only going to have that famine because of the immune system of plants. It's all immune system, eh? After all, the spleen is the spleen is the spleen. You can find it anywhere when you look at life. It's not just about our immune system weakening. Half of the world lives on a variety of maize that is simply one example cloned infinitely. You get that? Half of the population of the planet eats a cornmeal for their bread, for their food, whatever. But it is actually one corn cob, one corn plant that has been cloned endlessly to defend against a certain array of diseases. It's been developed that way. Now, what do you think happens to that invincible corn? The corn that was never going to allow famine to come again, the corn that was going to protect humanity's poorest and weakest. If it gets whacked and its immune system collapses. In other words, there are many, many things that are going to take place in a six-line phase in which the vulnerabilities that are there are not going to be able to get past anymore. Whenever I deal with somebody who has a six line in their profile and they've reached their Chiron point, one of my main things with them, it sounds like a threat, but it isn't. It's really a deep concern. If you don't live out who you are, you're deeply vulnerable to dying, and dying young. And dying young is dying in your 50s or your 60s. That's young in the way in which we live today and in the way in which our potential is designed. We already know that it's the sixth line being in their first 28 years that's the good that die young. They're the ones that are vulnerable. They're the ones that so easily can be killed off. So what do you think it's going to be like to live in a sixth line phase? Again, in describing these events, in talking about things happening, again, I want you to see it. There's so many layers to it. Obviously, if you have some kind of population crash or you have famine, it's also going to reduce the sexuality and reproduction and the population and, all of these different things going together. But it's something to be deeply, deeply aware of. That when we enter into the next age, that's why, I'm blessed with not being a missionary. Because I would be running around 24 hours a day, screaming at the top of my lungs to people. The ships are coming in, folks. It's time. You've got to get it. And if you don't get it, you're going to be incredibly vulnerable. And if you don't get it and you don't give it to your children, this is the ultimate crime of ignorance. Because they're just not going to be equipped. It is about us being able to exist correctly as ourselves, regardless of the environment. Children who enter into that phase as themselves, regardless of what their programming is, they'll be fine. They will be themselves. To be awake in this life is to have a cosmic umbrella. Doesn't matter what the weather is. Doesn't make any difference. I don't care where the transits are. Doesn't matter to me that this is there and that's there. It did once. It's how I learned. It's how I learned to see that this was all real. It's how I learned to see that I could be changed by this or that or the other thing. That I could be conditioned by this or that or the other thing. But I live out who I am. It doesn't matter where the planets are. It matters where I am. And it doesn't matter what the global cycle is. It matters who you are. This is knowledge for children. And those children that don't have this knowledge, when they enter into that age, that the life of the not-self in that age is spooky. It's frightening. And you see, there's not a lot of time. It's one of the things about coming in at the end of a round. I got this knowledge in 1987. 1927 is 40 years. You have 40 years to lay a foundation. Christianity had 500 years. Buddhism had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. Took time then. Took time to move the information. Took time to educate. Took time to perfect it. Takes time, all of these things. But everything's speedier. Everything's faster. The timelines are different. Everything is compressed in this. This is a very, very short, small window of opportunity. And you see, it's one of the jokes. It's not about the knowledge winning or losing. It isn't even about numbers. It's not about the end result. It is about making sure that this foundation is available. That's the key. That the foundation is available for the next cycle. And hopefully there's going to be, over the next 25 years, because after all, human design grows exponentially, has been from the beginning, that its spread over the next 25 years will penetrate deep enough into the consciousness of the planet to make sure that children who are going to enter into this next stage, that they are advantaged. The other thing is that obviously, as we will see when we come back from the lunch break, that the whole business of the rave coming into the world, that how that's going to operate and how well humanity is going to deal with this And whether or not humanity is going to recognize these children for what they are when they arrive, and how they're going to be dealt with, and whether they're going to be nurtured and protected, that's another story as well. There's great complexity that is opening up for us. We do have the background information. We do have the capacity to be able to explain what these beings, as you'll see, what these beings are really going to be like, and how different they're going to be from us, and how dangerous it will be for us to see them as children with problems, rather than seeing them as a species that's different than we are. Now that's quite a step. So we're living on the edge of what is a deep, deep mutational change. Everybody who's carrying a 6 line in their profile, you're the ones who are paving the way for this mutation. You yourselves will not really even glory in that until you get to that point. Even if it's only in old age, it won't matter to you. Believe me, it won't matter at all. Because you'll finally enter into your time. And in the context of those people who understand this knowledge and practice human design, this will be the final light at the end of the tunnel, at the personal level, about what this is all about. But recognize this is a very, very short window in order to be able to get the information out and in order to be able to establish the foundation. It's the only reason why in my lifetime I've seen scientific verification. It's one of the things that let me see right away. When it took a while, it took into the middle of the 90s, I'd already been on the road many, many years. It took a while, but the moment that it was there, it was clear to me, okay, if we can get a scientific verification at this stage, we've got a chance to get to that window in 2027 where we've really established the proper foundation. So we have enough evidence, that we have enough practice, that we have enough experiential and experimental background, that this is something that's natural to provide our children. Natural to provide our children, because they're going to need it. See, if you go into the next era, if you're born in the next era, you have to be your own example, because they're going to need it. See, if you go into the next era, if you're born in the next era, you have to be your own example, because that's what the program will expect from you. See, that's not what's expected now. Why do you think it's so difficult for people to wake up in design? It's not your fault. There's no choice. Don't blame yourself. It has nothing to do with that. It has to do with the time. Our era is very difficult for that. This is not a time to be a role model. This is a time to research. So I end up with so many wonderful human beings in my life who are great students of human design. And I deeply appreciate that. But I also recognize that they don't practice their design. And I know how hard that is. We live in a time of research. We live in a time of seeking the foundation. It's only those that are in the fractal line, that are here to pave the way, that have that chance of stepping outside into the future. You're all part of the future rather than the present. This is the old Piscean, locked into somebody telling you something and you listening and following. This is still the time. I'm still dealing with sheep. I'm still playing the old heretic alpha game. Here's the truth. The only difference with human design is that everything about human design is that there's no verification unless you do it yourself. And only then do you see the legitimacy of the nature of the knowledge. Only then do you see the legitimacy of the mechanics of what this is. And that's a way of guiding you towards your own authority and guiding you to a point where you can be an example. Not an example for others. Please recognize that. Everybody thinks it's about being an example for somebody else. Fuck them. It's about being your example. You understand the difference? We are unique. We are differentiated. The example that is expected is the example of your difference. That's what's expected. The example of your difference. Not that you're setting an example for somebody else. That was the old 6-line theme. Do as I do, not as I say. Or do as I say and not as I do, pardon me. They both sound good. That was the old 6-line game. Let me be your example. Let me tell you what the right example is. Follow my example. It's not about that. The real 6-line is, do you notice my difference? I'm different than you. Do you notice that? Do you notice that we're not alike? Isn't that nice? And who are you? And how are you different than me? What's your difference? I don't see that on you. You seem to be like everybody else. What's your problem? I'm different. Can't you see that? You're not different. You're just in the soup. That's the example. Oh, you see, look, what are you going to know about love unless you can be different? I mean, what can you possibly know? You certainly can't know spiritual love. I mean, that's really a joke. Dear God, bring me somebody who will help me. I mean, that's a problem in and of itself. The moment that you recognize that you are correct, that you have all the equipment to be correct, and the moment that you live out what is your difference, one of the classic problems of Maya dissolves. It's called comparison. We are all conditioned by comparison. All of us. Day one, out of the womb, here comes the comparison. He doesn't look like Johnny. He smells different. Look at those feet. Where did they come from? Why can't you be like your brother, your sister, your mother, your uncle, your dog? Why can't you be like me? You should look different. Why don't you change your hair, change your face, change your body? The old Tom Waits, never mind, I won't do it. It's all comparison. And of course, that comparison is only a hook when you assume that you're not what you want to be. When you assume that, you're supposed to be something that you're not. Well, I'm going to be the way my mother wants me to be. Or I'm going to be the way my father wants me to be. Or I'm going to be the way the teacher wants me to be. Or I'm going to be the way the law wants me to be. Or I'm going to be the way that God wants me to be. I'm going to be the way the priests want me to be. They can all go to hell. It's not what it's about. See, this is the integrity of individual human right. We are entering into an age of deep, profound, individual selfishness. You cannot step into that like anyone else. It will kill you. You have to step into that as yourself. And the moment that you realize that you're unique, there's no need to compare. What for? What for? What are you going to compare to? What am I going to compare myself to? Somebody who's got this or somebody who's got that. I got this. It's all I got. What am I going to compare it to? I'm not going to fix it. I'm not going to change it. I'm going to start racing channels. Let me color in this one. Oh, I want to have an open mind. It's all a horror. I only want to be what I am. I finally know what it is. It's really nice. I'm comfortable in here. I don't be like you. Not a chance. Not for a moment. Not for an instant. Not for a second. Nothing. And it wouldn't matter whether I'm healthy, unhealthy. It wouldn't matter my circumstances. It doesn't. There's nothing to compare to. I know that I'm unique, that I have a unique geometry. This is my ride. It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to take the ride. I like it. And I like taking the ride as me. Because you see, I spent years sitting on a hill with nothing to do, staring all day. Years. Just sitting, just staring. Ego manifester, Aryan, sitting, years, staring, nothing to do. Out of all of that, only one thing was clear to me. I was alone. Oh, was I alone? How incredibly alone I was. Smart as I am, all the things I know, all the things I see, all the people in my life, all the love that I've known, all the contact that I've had. In the end, hey, just me. Just me. And that me is my passenger, not this body. This body touches and loves and meets and all those things. But nobody's in here with me. Nobody will ever be in here with me. None of you will ever know who I am. You can't. I can't know you. Can't be there inside with you. We're alone here. We're alone. And we're alone for a reason. You know, we're alone to be able to come to the point of differentiated consciousness. Please recognize that. Oh, we'll have a long time tomorrow. You'll see. We'll have a long time where we don't have to be alone. Long time. Now, this whole process in these packages, nothing but aloneness. And oh, the pain of aloneness if you think you have to belong to something else, or be like something else, or need someone else. It's not about lonely. It's about being alone. I am alone in my uniqueness. We are all alone in our uniqueness. And it is our magic. It is our magic to get to a point where we can express that. You know, you find me interesting because I'm unique. I'm not a sheep. But I know that's true of all of you. You just wait to see it. At least I wait to see it. To meet uniqueness. To meet the differentiation. You can't imagine how great a task that is. They've just mapped the mouse genome. Very important for us. You know, we've already mapped the human genome. Now we've mapped the mice genome. And if you look at the tens of thousands of genes that humans and mice have, we only have 300 that are different. We only have 300 that are different. And huge amounts of genetic information. To get to a point of differentiation is the peak of our development. Sameness is so damn obvious. There's so little difference between you and I in terms of DNA. It's incredible how little difference there is. But that difference means everything. Because there is what our responsibility is. That's what I love about the human designed body graph. It's what I love most about the body graph. The body graph says, hey, this is your difference. Now be it. And here's how.